Good to be here.
Let me say this. Fabulous book.
Thank you.
Filled with such interesting research and unusual and I think really interesting ideas. I mean, does America require poverty to function in the way that we do? Is it a requirement of our society?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No. I
So
mean,
right?
Is the system we run, do they require, in the capitalist system, people in poverty to function at maximum profit?
I think a lot of us do benefit from poverty in ways we don't realize, right? We soak the poor in the labor market, the housing market. We continue to have a government that gives the most to families that need it the least by subsidizing affluence instead of fighting poverty.
Right.
We continue to live in segregated lives. A lot of us are connected to that problem, but it also means we're connected to the solution. I don't think we have to live with all this poverty in America.
This system can work. You say something in the book that blew my mind, which is there's a part in there where you talk about the tax burden.
Yeah.
And if we just collected the taxes that were owed,
Yeah.
it would account for $1.something trillion. And your calculation of how we could end poverty in this country was how much money?
So if you take everyone below the poverty line and lift them above it, that's about $177 billion a year. And it's a super rough estimate, but it gives us a sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about ending poverty, because that's so utterly attainable for us, right? That's less than 1% of our GDP.
Right.
So a study came out that showed that if the top 1% of Americans just paid all the taxes they owed.
Just the ones they owed?
Just the ones they owed, and not got taxed at a higher rate, just paid what they owed, we would net about $175 billion a year. So we could just about close the poverty gap.
Just with, and without levying other taxes, just collecting what we need.
Right. I mean, so like...
So,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But when you say that, I just go, no.
Right.
That can't be.
Right.
But be.
Right.
That's insane. And it's not, the one thing I will say, it's not like we don't spend money on alleviating poverty. We do. The budget for America was what, 3.7 trillion 10 years ago. Now it's like 7 trillion.
Yeah.
We do spend the money. Are we just spending it inefficiently?
So I think we have to recognize that the things that we are doing to fight poverty now really, really matter. Medicaid, food stamps, housing assistance, these are lifesavers, right? And so these programs are lifting millions of folks above the poverty line every year. We also have to recognize that we have to do more, because the problem's getting a lot worse.
Right.
So over the last 50 years, we've had wages stagnate for too many workers. We've had housing costs soar. We now have the lowest wages, some of the lowest wages in the industrialized world, in the richest country in the history of the world.
Our poverty levels are higher than almost all other countries in the industrial world.
They're not just higher. Like our child poverty rate is double what it is in Canada, Germany, South Korea. You go to Europe, Europeans have this phrase like American-style deprivation. So
I don't even want to know what the German word for that is. Right. But it's very long and sounds like someone has bronchitis.
Right.
But this is the part that's shocking. We've done things. I'm going to go back to the pandemic. That there was the era, the rent assistance program, and the child tax credits. Poverty dropped in the pandemic when people were really suffering by what percent?
So the third rescue plan, the third rescue bill under Biden, signed it in March, right? We dropped child poverty by 44% in 6 months because of that intervention.
So we naturally, at that point, had to end it very quickly.
Right.
That program.
Right. Well, a lot of that because we were quiet. We dropped evictions to the lowest they've been ever on record. We did the most for poor kids we've done since the war on poverty and the Great Society. And there was not a lot of us saying, this is the new America that we want. We weren't writing our congressperson. We weren't talking to our neighbor about it. We were quiet. And in our silence, like 5 million more kids got tossed into poverty the next year. And so I think is
it a question of when we think about, we always think like, well, for people below the poverty line, there's a ton of programs for them. But I'm a little bit above it, and my parents are getting older, and my kids are going to school, and I'm in a tight squeeze, and quite frankly, I don't want any resources that I might have to pay into. And are there too many people, even above poverty, who are struggling, but feel like I'm not getting any value on my return for tax dollars? Yeah. Isn't there a little resource guarding? And by the way, not without cause.
Yeah, there's something to that. But one thing that blew me, I think the thing that blew me away writing this book is that if you look at everything the government does for us, all those poverty programs that flow to the poorest families, like food stamps, social insurance, like Social Security, but also tax breaks. You got to count tax breaks. You know, they cost the government money and they put money in my pocket. If you add all that up, you learn that the average family, the bottom 20% of the income distribution, so our poorest families, they're receiving about $26,000 a year from the government.
Okay.
So the average family in the top 20%, our richest families, they're receiving about $35,000 a year from the government.
Say that again?
So this is the true nature of our welfare state. They're getting about 40% more than the poorest families. And then we have like the audacity, the shamelessness to look at a program that would like reduce child poverty or make sure all of us had access to a dentist and be like, gosh, how could we afford it?
Right.
You know?
Here's where they go with that. And this is the thing that I would like you to talk about, which is what they would say is, oh yeah, but the top 10%, 20%, they pay all the taxes. I don't think people understand what a regressive tax system we really have for people, not just at poverty, but working class, middle class, that comes from sales taxes and everything. People pay much more percentage of their income at the lower levels, even though it's not federally taxed.
Right. So, you know, a lot of folks just look at that income tax and they'll say the poor aren't paying taxes. But that's like counting calories only by counting what you had for breakfast.
Right.
You know, and so if you look at the whole tax structure, you see, you know, a lot of the poor, working class, middle class folks are paying the same tax levy as rich folks. The folks that have the lowest tax burden in the country, of course, are richest families. Makes no sense.
But we're not bad people.
No.
So what is going wrong? Is it, if you were Doge, if you were there to say, how could we do this more efficiently to get people that are struggling to alleviate that? Because in many other countries, they do that.
Yeah.
What would you say?
So I think we got to do three things. We got to deepen our investments in fighting poverty. We got to get back to those big, bold programs that we had in the Great Society. We saw what we could do in COVID.
What were some of those programs that you would?
So we expanded Social Security. We created Medicaid and Medicare. We expanded educational opportunities. These were deep investments in the poorest families in the country.
Right.
So we need to get back to that. We can fund that by fair tax implementation. So the IRS chair a few years ago told Congress that we lose $1 trillion a year, $1 trillion, on tax cheating and evasion.
$1 trillion?
$1 trillion.
Yeah, those poor people are getting away with a ton.
Right.
$1 trillion a year. And alleviating poverty would be $200 billion a year. What?
Right.
Is there something in the system of federalism that means those dollars to the poor? Like, if Walmart has a $5 billion or $10 billion profit, and yet still a lot of their workers are on public assistance or struggle, who might not be below poverty line, but just above it, how are we not penalizing them?
Right. I think we need to move back to that question, which I think it's this like second piece of the puzzle. We need to have new ways of empowering the poor. We need to find a way to build worker power, to expand housing choice, to finally take on all the ways they're getting financially soaked by banks and payday lenders in the country.
Right.
And so this is a way.
Why is that so hard? Is it that poor people need better lobbyists? Is that what this is? Like, how does this get done?
They need better choice, so they're not accepting the best bad option all the time. So if you think of like, how are we going to build worker power in this economy? So now you got to go to one Amazon warehouse or one Starbucks location at a time, right? Remember when we were losing our minds because one Amazon warehouse in Staten Island maybe organized a few summers ago, and we were like, oh my gosh. You know, but we have no chance of organizing all our warehouse workers or baristas like this. So we have to have different approaches. So the new labor movement is saying, let's organize entire sectors. Let's get everyone in food and hospitality. Let's say if they take a vote, then that could trigger a process where the Secretary of Labor is like, all right, let's bring worker representatives, corporate representatives, let's hash something out that covers every single worker in that sector. So this is what policy wonks call sectoral bargaining. And it's a way to organize all those kind of warehouse workers, all those baristas in one go.
Is there something, too, to getting the government to value labor again in the way that they value capital?
Right.
Capital being taxed at, gains that are much lower.
Right.
There's a lot of rules that ease capital. Stock buybacks. You're only, have to answer to shareholders. Is there a way to get workers in on that? Because that seems like where the accumulation of wealth seems the greatest.
Right.
How do we plug labor into that stream without necessarily killing the stream, but letting it really, getting them into the flow of it?
Yeah. Why don't we put workers on corporate boards, for example?
Easy. Why do they fight that? And would sectoral bargaining get that done?
It could move us closer to something more like a capitalism we deserve, a capitalism that serves the people, not the other way around. And a lot of the times, I think the ideas we have about growth are just wrong. If you rewind the clock, 1960s, we had a higher corporate tax rate, about 50%. About 1 in 3 of us were belonging to a union. And we were much more productive as an economy than we are now. And we're kind of fed this lie that we got to slash these unions, we got to slash this corporate tax break, and we're going to get the economic growth. And we win in that bargain. And we got the inequality, but we didn't get the growth.
But don't you think the financialization of our economy changed that calculus? We used to think about IBM, the blue chip companies.
Yeah.
You would invest in them, and they would have steady growth, and they would give you dividends, and you would work for them for 40 years. I was thinking, if you were to reasonably watch the news networks, the little bug in the corner is the stock market. Right? If you go to a hospital, they plug you into a machine. It gives you your pulse, your blood pressure, all that. You would be well within your rights to think that is the measure of my health.
Right.
I'm looking at that. When you watch that, you would think, oh, that must be the measure of our economy's health.
Right.
Is there a way to educate the public that that's not actually our economy?
Right.
That's just a tiny fraction that goes mostly to, the top 10% own 50% of the wealth in the stock market. What other measures would give people a better sense of how we're failing?
Right. Could we have a ticker that's about, the number of families who went to a food pantry this month to eat, right? A ticker that's like the number of families that lost their homes. Like a ticker about the number of kids that can't afford a winter coat this winter,
Yes.
And kind of tracking that is like the people's economy.
How many people have parents that need elder care, but it's squeezing them because their kids are going to cut? Give a sense of that. By the way, I reopened that cut just by hitting like that.
Oh, man.
Just by doing that. I can't even do this anymore. Critique it now from the left a little bit.
Yeah.
Are there things that the left advocates for or does that makes this realignment harder?
I just don't think the left has fully committed to poverty abolitionism. We know where our local organic cucumber came from, but we don't.
Wait, we do?
We do.
Wait, is it written on there? Do I have to hold it under a blue light? How do we do it?
We know.
All right.
We know. We don't know how much the farmhand got paid picking it.
No. Yes.
If you go to London, you go to the independent stores, they have a sticker on the door, and they say, this store pays a living wage. Now, our stores, we've got a lot of stickers, but we often don't have that one, And so I think that more of us have to just commit.
You're saying we've got to put up "Poverty has no home here" signs?
I think the left needs to get more serious about economic justice.
And do you think? So I always worry. Here's what I always worry about, and I worry about this with climate. It always comes down to, for some reason on the left, you people just have to be better people, and that'll put pressure on it. I feel like the whole point of joining as a society is that a system can alleviate that, like, I just don't know how we get out of it without it coming from legislation. I don't know. I mean, when you say, like, we've got to call our congressman, I'm like, I've been in that situation where you call congressman, it does diddly poo. Like, they're not even answering, and half the time they don't even know the ins and outs of what you're talking about. Like, the country's held together by hundreds and hundreds of legislative aides that are working tirelessly. Can't we present them? I would love to see you lobby in Washington, because I feel like you have interesting ideas that haven't tried. We're not walking down the same tired path. Is that a possibility or no? They don't. Are they open to that?
Of me going to Washington?
Yes. People like you.
I don't know. I'd have to get a tie.
Do they call you? Did they at least ask?
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah. But I think, you know, we definitely need more political movements. We need new legislation, but we also need more skin in the game, I think, as a country. So, like, let's think about segregation, right? So segregation is upheld by zoning laws. It's upheld by history, but it's also upheld, like, at soccer games, you know, where your buddy turns to you and you're like, you know, you saw that building. We're not gonna build that thing, right? It's upheld in little.
Oh, you mean NIMBY? Sort of like, we all want economic justice.
For those guys
over there. If you wouldn't mind. But doesn't that speak to that the systems then have to? Here's what I would say. We think of poverty as a vice, and we think of entitlements as a moral hazard for vice. Why don't we view it as investment? Why don't we view, like, what a great economic engine for this country to take areas that have suffered entrenched poverty and rejuvenate them in a different way.
There's huge investments. So look at food stamps, right?
Yes.
$1 billion dedicated to food stamps gets you $1.5 billion in our GDP. If you look at what it does for kids, the long-term economic and health benefit for kids, it's a huge return on investment. It's about $1 in food stamps gets you $62 coming back to you in a society. Meanwhile, right, when we cut the corporate tax rate, the benefits we get are a lot less. We get a lot less than we're promised often when we're doing that. So investing in American people and stabilizing communities that need it the most is the best way for all of us.
I got to tell you, that out of all that argument, that to me was the most concise and powerful, because, and it's one that I really haven't heard, which is, you don't understand, like, we're not just giving people money, we're investing and getting a huge return. And all these corporate subsidies are not getting us a good return.
Exactly.
That's fabulous right there. Is anyone watching this? I really appreciate it. This book, if you get a chance, it will open your eyes to a system that can often be well-meaning, but not function in the manner that it purports to be functioning. And it's really a wonderfully accessible journey through that. So I really appreciate the book. Be sure to check out Poverty by America, Matthew Desmond.